Hello, I am Scott Wiedenhoft, and this is my presentation on Ferrari, their strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and some threats for the shareholders. I'm doing this for my Business 101 class. First off, we start off with the reason why I chose Ferrari. I grew up watching a lot of high action TV shows and movies, playing lots of video games, and Ferrari was one of those that just always stood out to me. I just loved the way the cars looked and how fast they were. And when I was in high school, they came out with this beautiful car right here, which is the Ferrari 360 Spider, and to this day is probably the most beautiful car I've ever seen. A little history on Ferrari. It started off back in 1939. Enzo Ferrari was a driver, then became a crew chief for the Fiat or Alfa Romeo Corporation, their racing team, and he was able to devise his own team under the Alfa Romeo team, known as Scuderia Ferrari. That was back in 1939. Fortunately, the world went into war around that time, so racing was kind of postponed for a few years. After the war, though, Enzo did end up creating his own racing team, completely independent, built his own cars, engines, everything, specifically to defeat his former employer of Alfa Romeo, and this happened in 1947. And Enzo was very successful. In fact, the first year in competition, he was able to beat his former employer in racing in Europe. Immediately building a great on-track reputation. It's still held to this day. Just Ferrari is known throughout the racing community in the world as being one of the best auto manufacturers to this day. Unfortunately, racing doesn't always pay all the bills, and Ferrari supplemented his race income by producing cars for the people to buy. The profits and everything were directly then put into the racing program. Unfortunately, Ferrari wasn't able to produce and sell enough vehicles to keep the racing program where Enzo Ferrari wanted it. So Enzo started looking at potential mergers or who you'd have to sell to. His big thing, though, is he wanted absolute control of the racing team because that was the most important thing to him. He built cars to sell so that he could fund his racing. Whereas other companies look at it more they try to do well on the track to help sell the cars that they produce. So Enzo was a little reverse as to what the normal thinking was for racing versus auto manufacturing. So Enzo had gotten really close to making a deal with Ford, but it didn't look like Ford was going to give him the control that he wanted of the racing team. So at the last minute, Enzo backed out of the deal. And then in 1969, Enzo ended up signing a deal with Fiat to sell controlling interest of Ferrari to Fiat. The stipulation was that he did get to retain control over race team decisions and development. That lasted for almost 60 years. But as you can see, in 2016, Ferrari did end up getting their independence back from Fiat, which at the time and now is FCA, or Fiat Chrysler Automotive Group. And they went from 10% of freely traded securities to 66% freely traded securities, making them a publicly owned company again. First we're going to discuss about the strengths of Ferrari. Somebody that creates a company to race cars that is a former race car driver, that was Enzo's goal. And in Formula One, at the end of last year's season, the 2023 season, Ferrari is the winningest manufacturer in Formula One history, with a total of 16 constructors or manufacturers titles, as well as 15 drivers titles. So the drivers that won the championship drove for Ferrari, whereas the constructors, the race finishes, instead of they get points based off of where the manufacturer finishes in the race. With this, it does immediately generate name brand strength, because you're winning the cars, you're winning the races with the cars, you're using that technology, putting it into your consumer used vehicles, and the customers are going to want to buy those vehicles because they know they've got performance, they've got the racing history to prove it, and a lot of the development that they use on track they put into their cars, which really helps with added performance and drivability of vehicles, and that's a way to get that competitive edge over your competition. The other thing is Ferrari has a lot of value retention. So, they say that once you drive a car off the lot, it immediately depreciates, a bunch of percent the second you drive it off the lot. Well, with a Ferraris don't lose that value. In fact, according to a study that came out last year, in the top 23 highest paid for vehicles at auction, 12 of the top 23 were Ferrari. Of the top 13, 10 of them, and of the top 5, 4 of them. So that means a total of 12 of those 23 were Ferraris, with the highest one going for $51.7 million. Ferrari also, one of their strengths is they have additional revenue. It's not just the selling of cars and parts. Things that they do to create this additional revenue is they do licensing to games and stuff like that. They've got merchandising, so hats, shirts, jackets, stuff with the Ferrari logo on it. They've also got royalties from older stuff, games, movies, stuff like that, where the money is continuing to come in year after year. They actually sell some of their engines to other race teams in Formula One. So maybe it's a team that can build the chassis and the body and everything, but they just don't have the power to compete with the Formula One cars. They can actually go out and buy or rent engines from Ferrari. And if you look at this additional revenue, it does account for 14.3 of Ferrari's revenue, which totaled a grand total of 851 million euros. And Ferrari's total revenue for their entire company was 5.97 billion euros. And with that, they were able to use 329 million euros in dividends. So they paid that back to, somebody like you who's a potential shareholder. That's money that's going right back into your pocket. And then the other thing that's really good for a shareholder is Ferrari spent 461 million euros in stock buyback. A couple years ago, they sat down and decided that they wanted to strengthen the stance of each shareholder by buying back some of the stock, thus making your stock a higher percentage of the company owned. And that's something they've been working on. They just finished the most recent stage of their buyback program just a couple weeks ago. And then the other good thing was the dividend payout ratio went from 30% to 35% of the adjusted net profit sharing. Licensing and movies. Okay, so This is just some of what Ferrari has been known for in movies and TV. So here in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you've got a Ferrari 250 Spider. Magnum PI drove a Ferrari 308 GTS. In the movie Scent of a Woman, Al Pacino drove a Ferrari Montedale Cabriolet. In the movie The Rock, there was a chase scene involving Sean Connery and Nick Cage. Nick Cage was driving a 355 Spider. The TV show Miami Vice, they are really known for this white Testarossa, though Sonny did have a Ferrari Daytona Spider at the very beginning of the show. And then the most well-known and most profitable movie series that has to do with cars and racing, Fast and the Furious, has used Ferraris through multiple movies. You've got Tej's 458 Italia here. Also had a Ferrari FXX. You've got the Ferrari 430 Scuderia, the Ferrari 360 Spider, and Ferrari 355 Spider. In addition to the movies, you've also got video games. So these are just some of the video games that Ferrari graced the covers of. This doesn't even include the games like Gran Turismo or Forza, where the cars are drivable cars in the game. So all of this is just profit for them. Another huge revenue for them is a few years back, they opened a place called Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, which is in the UAE, one of the most wealthy countries in the world. And there is just a lot of things to do. This is what the compound looks like from the outside aerial view. This domed area where a lot of the stuff is, if you want to, you can actually pay for a roof walk experience. You get a beautiful view of Abu Dhabi. They've got the world's fastest roller coaster currently, which is called the Formula Rossi. Another couple cool things that they have there is, instead of having the little foldable maps that, a lot of amusement parks have, you can just download it straight to your phone. Really neat thing that they have there also is FacePass facial recognition software. So basically there's a few steps that you do. You basically log your face in, and as you go through the different places, all of your tickets, and you can have a credit card or debit card or money attached to that. So you go, you want food or drink or whatever, you can just go up, get what you want. It scans your face and will automatically charge you for what you got. You get in line to go on one of the exhibits or rides or anything like that, scans your face, says, yep, they've got a ticket, and allows you in. They've also got Driver Ferrari, where as long as you have a valid driver's license to drive in the UAE, which isn't really hard to apply for or get, you can hop under Ferrari with a certified trainer, and you get to drive around the streets of the island that Ferrari World is on. And then they also have a really neat go-karting academy where you go in, you learn a whole bunch of stuff about racing. Weaknesses of Ferrari. Unfortunately, most of their weaknesses come from their exclusivity. They are known for high-priced luxury speed vehicles, and by doing so, they don't have a high output. They only have one manufacturing plant in the world, and that's in Maranello, Italy, which only 5.4% of all Ferrari sales are domestic. So that means over 94% of all of their sales are exported, which means you have to pay tariffs, taxes, and stuff like that for shipping them out of country. And the other thing is non-automated processes. So they believe that by using humans to do the craft work and everything, that it slows the things down, makes the craftsmanship better. Well, humans are prone to flaws, whereas computers, as long as they're programmed properly, the computer can't make a mistake. It only can do what you program it to do. So that's really a loss in their book. You can have better quality things by automated computer processes. The only exception is to the valve mechanic installation. They do have an automated process for that. But because they do everything by hand except for the valve mechanics, they're only able to put out 13,663 cars in all of 2023, which is really low in compared to one of the biggest auto manufacturers in the world, General Motors, which put out 2.6 million cars last year. Because of this low volume and exclusivity, the cost of a Ferrari, the cheapest Ferrari, is $200,000 more than the US average of $44,000 for a brand new vehicle. Opportunities for Ferrari, continue outside of cars and parts growth. So that goes back to their licensing, merchandising, royalties, the things that aren't selling cars. They can totally continue to expand in that market. Lifestyle branding, they have basically created their own lifestyle brand where they've been able to outsource another company that builds and sells the Ferrari. Well, I guess it builds for them. Ferrari still sells items with the Ferrari brand. So, like throw pillows, patio furniture, stuff like that. It's all considered part of the Ferrari brand. Clutches, purses for women's. Another opportunity for them is to open an additional manufacturing facility. Right now, the United States accounts for over a quarter of Ferrari's total sales, and they are a higher percentage than the next two countries combined. So if you can put a plant in the United States, that's a bunch of tariffs and stuff that you're no longer having to pay because you're manufacturing the vehicles in the country where your most sales are. And if they don't want to do one of the cars that they're building in Italy, they could totally work on developing a more cost-effective vehicle. I'm not saying that they're going to go all the way down to be competitive with the U.S. average price of $44,000, but if you can get it down to the $70,000 to $90,000 range, that opens your market to a lot more potential sales. You don't have to worry about the people that can spend $250,000 on buying a vehicle. Now you're looking at something that's twice the average rather than 5 times the average. Threats to Ferrari. Like any auto manufacturer, your biggest threat comes from the other auto manufacturers. Right now, you've got supercar races going on, not race, but competition, where trying to build the fastest, most outlandish vehicles available. Ferrari held the speed record for quite a number of years through the 60s into the 70s. Lamborghini was devised specifically to dethrone Ferrari, which they accomplished the first year that they came out. But immediately Ferrari came back and countered and took the throne back. But since then, you've got companies like Bugatti and Koenigsegg at McLaren and Venom who have all passed Ferrari by quite a margin. And then you've also got Ford is another one of their main threats. They've just a long rivalry dating back to Enzo Ferrari and the 60s where they almost sold to Ford. The huge rivalry started and really capstone early on when Ford set out to beat Ferrari in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, where Ford developed the GT40 with Carroll Shelby and finished first, second, and third place at the 24-hour race, knocking Ferrari off the throne. And you've also got Chevrolet, who recently redesigned the Corvette, putting a mid-mount engine in it instead of a front-mount engine, which allows aerodynamics in the front to be smaller, more aerodynamic, and it can do 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, whereas the Ferrari 810 can do it in 2.9 seconds, but costs $300,000 more. Racing threats. Ferrari, known in the racing world. However, Red Bull Racing has really stepped up their game in the last few years. The last championship that Ferrari held, the constructor's title was in 2007, and hasn't won one since. Whereas Red Bull has won it the last 4 consecutive years. Ferrari still holds a huge lead overall, but in recent years, it's been Red Bull that's been really challenging them. Another huge threat is power generation. Ferrari is known for the powerful engines, and since Ferrari's development, it's been the internal combustion engine. We've done more studies showing that the exhaust from those engines is really doing a number on our environment and climate. So starting to look towards greener ways of making cars go. So that's going to be a threat across the board to every manufacturer that is primarily internal combustion engines. And you know, who knows what technology is going to be out there 5, 10, 15 years. All the money that they're spending in research for battery-powered vehicles, EVs, could be changed to hydrogen cars, or who knows what the next thing is going to be. And then the last thing is just global economy. The global economy is a fragile thing at the best of times, and especially when we had this pandemic a couple years ago, a lot of money was lost. And when you're a company like Ferrari who sells cars starting at $250,000, if the economy's bad, the people aren't out there with the ability to buy these cars and buying the cars. So for the future of Ferrari, operationally, they said getting another assembly plant, preferably in the United States. Biggest market for Ferrari is here in the United States, and getting that cheaper vehicle out. Ferrari doesn't want to keep the brand name of Ferrari. That's fine. Go with something else, name it something else, make it a subsidiary. That's fine, because the people that are going to be buying those cars are the people that know behind whatever badge they put on it is the heart of the prancing pony. Financially, continue to supplement the revenue. As a car manufacturer, if you can get your licensing and merchandising out to as many people as possible, as many movies as possible, that's going to get you increase your revenues considerably. Continue with the stock buyback program. That's going to help the investors. You know, you're going to get more investors that way. The investors are going to be happier with how things are going. And then profit sharing increase from 30 to 35%. That's another way you're going to strengthen your bond with your shareholders. So, thank you for your time.